All right, so we are live. Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah, because maybe it's not like once like 4 months that they cut my hair.
All right, so we are live. Let's go.
House, over to you.
Okay. Hello, good evening from Nigeria, and I guess it's afternoon in New York. Welcome to Talking Design with TDwGates. I'm Charles Njoku, and it's my pleasure to moderate this session. And today we'll be talking about the designer as a leader. First of all, allow me to briefly introduce our guest speaker, Invision's Chief Design Evangelist. Steven, do you call Chief Design Evangelist or Head Design Evangelist?
Yeah, I don't know. I never get caught up on job titles. It's whatever. I mean, you can say, hey, you and point. I think usually it's head of design evangelism. So yeah, if we're talking about design or creativity or helping people do that's what I'm in charge of.
Oh well, okay. Uh, so, how are you doing today? And I mean, how excited are you about this?
No, I mean, I think that's been the great. So I'm good. It's finally. I know it's very different in Nigeria. I think so. It's just starting to get warm here in New York. It's been winter for a while, so we can start going back outside and things like that. That's been really good. But no, I mean, I love doing stuff like this. I mean, I always love being able to work with the community or doing things like that. And I think, this is the great part of this technology is that, I can spend my morning with a bunch of leaders in, Amsterdam. I can, do some one-on-one coaching for lunch. And then, by the afternoon, be able to talk to the whole design community in Nigeria. So I think like that's amazing. And I think I'd mentioned before, it's like, there are two places I am dead set on getting to as soon as I can. And Africa and the Middle East are definitely both of those. So until I'm able to get on an airplane again, like this is at least a great start.
Nice, nice. I mean, we would love to have you in Nigeria, by the way. Um, so whenever that happens, trust me, I think the excitement on social media is going to it's going to have like an exponential increase. So expect that to happen. Okay, Steven is a global design leader building world-class organizations that integrate human-centered design to drive product and service innovation. I copied that from your LinkedIn somewhere. I'm sure you I'm sure you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. No, it's always a little weird because it's like somebody having it's like I always feel it's like somebody reading your obituary, but you're alive. Um yeah, I mean, for me, I've been a designer my whole life, literally. I think a lot of people say that. So my dad was actually a creative director.
Oh wow.
I started when I was 2 years old. He and I used to go write my own. We used to go write my own storybooks, and we had a 700-pound cast iron letterpress in our basement. So like we
Awesome.
would go down, and he would do the illustrations, and I would sit there and like set the lead type. I have a photo of me, very tiny, standing on the press. Yeah, I started working at his agency whenever I was 12. So yeah, I've literally been in design my entire life.
Interesting enough, I think we share like a similar story. So my mom started off as a typist. My dad owned a printing press. So I've seen the computer since I was like 4,
Hmm.
and as young as 7, that was when I had my first computer, and at 14, I was working in the press as the designer. Pretty much started using Corel Draw 9, if I remember. Yes.
Oh yeah, no, I get yeah, I start to feel real old whenever I remember Photoshop 1. Like whenever, and I remember
Wow.
like when, yeah, I remember like even before computers, like there's a whole bunch of stuff people have to Google to figure out what it was. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I said. But for me, like that was such the magical thing was being able to be involved with that. from such a young age. Like, so that's why I said, like, I always told my parents they couldn't complain about like the bills for art school because like I didn't have a choice.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. So Steven is currently the head design evangelist at Invision, and prior to that, he was the head of design transformation, and also before that, the global head of design at Citi. So, like you said, your day to day as a design evangelist involves talking about design a lot and
Mm-hmm.
educating. For I checked and you said something about educating strategic partners like Google, Amazon, Bank of America, Facebook, Rolls Royce, American Express, and I'm wondering, feels like you're responsible for like some of the world's biggest design teams. I
Well,
mean,
I mean, I think so. So I worked in advertising for a long time. Then I worked at like Starred Hotels for 9 years. Then yeah, I was the first like global head of design in like the 200-year history of Citibank. Then I ended up here at Envision, and I think a lot of what it was that as I traveled around the world, as I talked, as I started doing my podcast, as I started doing these sort of things, I just found that it was like no matter where you were in the world, no matter what language you spoke, no matter what it is you did, we all were just sort of struggling with some really common things. And so I ended up, this was a job I wasn't actually looking for. I had a conversation with Clark from Invision. So, Envision's a 100% remote company. It has been since it was born. And he just said, look, like, what do you think the industry needs? And I said, look, I see all these amazing creatives. I see these amazing companies who just can't get over the red tape or the politics or the old ways of thinking to actually be more innovative and creative. And so I said, I think there's some role there, there's some team there to be able to help them go in and to be able to fix that. Because in my experience, if you're working inside of a company, you can say the right thing again and again and again, and people just don't seem to listen. But if somebody from the outside who they respect comes in and says the exact same thing, then all of a sudden it's genius and we have to do it. So I think that was what it was started. And that's where the design transformation team was started, was really saying, look, we just want to come in. We believe that the people who work in their company are smart enough. We are not interested in doing your design work. What we want to do is to help you get over like all the red tape, because the thing was like, if you look at it, companies aren't having a problem having ideas. They're having problems getting those ideas out the door. There's too much politics and so we're like, look, maybe we can help people with that so that they'll value design, they'll value creativity. And so, yeah, what we've discovered, or what I very quickly discovered, is that it turns out every company in the world is dysfunctional. And so, whatever company you think is fantastic and doing it right. Yeah, I work with people at Apple, at Google, at Facebook, at Amazon. I work with all 1,500 designers at Amazon, at Airbnb, at Uber, at, again, all these different companies, because there's always just such complexity to it. So yeah, I try to go in and help them figure out how to be more creative, figure out how to do better design work, coach their CEO, do different things like that. So I wear a lot of different hats, but yeah, it gives you an incredible perspective into all these different companies and what works and what doesn't.
I mean, interesting. I I think I find it more interesting the fact that you also acknowledge the politics. That part it gets to my nerves a lot, and I'm happy we will be able to talk about that too. For our audience, Steven also is the host of the Crazy One podcast, and he has 99 episodes. I mean, I I remember seeing your tweet about your 100th episode. Anyways, I might have to love you to be on the one. His Steven's podcast give actionable insights to be more creative, to become a better leader, and I mean more like how to create innovative work. And I think your first, your first 10 podcast was a lot more about um, creativity, and I like the fact that it has this kind of transition into the real design work afterwards, then leadership, then some insights from your own learnings. Yeah, so also about building better relationships and eventually growing an overall career. Yeah, so you guys might want to check the Crazy One podcast. The link will be dropped in the comment section for you to check out. So, Steven, I feel like just an overview of your career. I feel like in a very not so short time, you've actually done a lot. I feel like it's a hell of a career, and what I mentioned earlier is probably just an abridged version, and I mean you've done well to highlight a few things your day-to-day work looks like. So, I mean, I want to say I'm blown, but so I mean, just tell us and tell our audience a brief intro into what design felt like starting as a junior designer. You said something about doing advertising
Yeah,
and
yeah,
before going into
yeah.
design education.
Yeah, so it was. So I did. I started in advertising, and that was, I started as like a junior graphic designer in my dad's agency. Whenever I was 12. So by the time I was leaving high school, I actually had worked on, some graphic design work and a bunch of different print work. I think is that point, like you're a teenager, you want to be rebellious, and I'm like, I'm going to be creative, but I'm not going to do what my parents do. Um, so when I went to university, it was really the early days of like digital and 3D animation and a lot of those sort of things. So I'd studied computer graphics and 3D animation. I worked as a 3D animator on all sorts on commercials and movies and a bunch of stuff when I got out of school. And then there was this weird moment where there was at that point a program that was called Future Splash that turned into Macromedia Flash, that turned into Adobe Flash, that unfortunately turned into a dead end career. But I think that that moment let me be able to combine. I had a background where I could actually program in a couple different languages, so I could learn ActionScript. I understood motion and storytelling because of my background in working in animation. And then I think I also just understood advertising because of my background with my dad. And so McCann Erickson here in New York had hired me, and I worked for a little bit in New York. And they sort of, look, we've got this agency in Texas, and we want you to go down and sort of help because we have this one group of people, and all they understand is like the old ways of doing print advertising. And we have these weird people who are like on computers, and they can't figure out how to talk to each other. So can you figure out how to get them to talk to each other? So at that point, living in New York, which is not cheap, went down and took a look at Texas. They showed me like a big townhouse. They told me how much it would cost to live there. Whenever they told me how much it was, I asked them if it was for a week because I couldn't believe it was so cheap to live there. So I think, spent 6 years down there. And it was a big change because I think I loved working in advertising, but I started to do more branding. I started to do more strategy work. And then just one day changed everything. And that was one of our biggest clients that I was working on was American Airlines. And I was working on their business on September 11th. And so on September 12th, had to go to their offices and try to figure out, how do we keep a company that was already on the edge of bankruptcy from going bankrupt? How do we keep this company and the employees that are here, how do we give them some sense of hope? How do we deal with this sort of unprecedented moment in human history? And I think in that moment, I really discovered that for me, like building a brand was much more interesting than building an ad for a brand. So 15 years ago, I did this, freaked out all my friends, and I said, look, I want to go work in-house for a design team. And everybody always thought that's where you went to go end your career. Ended up, that was where I spent 9 years at Starwood Hotels, that came in as to try to help turn their company around. It was probably one of the most, it was the best job I've probably ever had, in the weirdest interview, because I just really went in there. Like, I turned the job down 3 times. I was like, look, you guys don't understand what you're doing. And I just showed up with this crazy proposal about everything that needs to change. And they're like, yes. And it was like, damn it, I'm moving back to New York. But I think over that 9 years, showed up to a company that was really struggling, that couldn't figure out how to really transform itself. The design team was sort of mostly doing like posters for the elevators. And by 9 years later, when I left, I think our work had been in 8 Apple keynotes. We were one of the 3 sort of top teams. We'd been called in. I got to work on the Apple Watch months before it had been ever announced. We were one of the 2 featured launch apps. Did a lot of just amazing work. And I always loved that it was the exact same leadership team the day I got there as the day I left. And so to really be a part of doing that, doing a lot of really, really amazing work was great. That company decided to go in a different direction. Yeah, I took over as the first global head of design in the 210-year history of Citibank. So the first time of like really bringing a design team into a 300,000 person company. That was not a small feat. But yeah, I think that for me, it's just always been about how do I do work that connects with people? How do I find sort of the truth of the experience that we sort of all share? How do I take it back to those people and ask them sort of, is it working a lot? And just honestly, like, how do I work my ass off? Because I think that's why whenever I come from that place, my work, like that's why I said, I can work in branding, I can work in video, I can work in digital, I can sort of work in any medium, because for me, if the idea and the connection's right, then the execution part's easy.
Interesting. I mean, I think I could sit all day to hear about all your experiences across all the companies you worked for. But I think tying the fundamental part of why you do design to people is, I mean, it's fantastic. It's important. I've learned that myself, that in the long run, that's what makes everything, all of it make sense at the end of the day. Not posters, not screens, not buttons. At the end of the day, you want to look back and see how all of those small bits um, form part of what becomes impactful for people. So it's interesting. It's very interesting fact. Yeah. Um, I have gone over your design for the Apple Watch, especially the one for the hotels, the one for the key, the door key.
Oh, keyless entry, yeah.
Exactly. I think that's fantastic, interesting. I mean, really, really interesting. Um, did so just a sidetrack from all of that. Um, was it possible to kind of like um, offer the product as what's it called, the the docket to other hotels globally, or was it just the one hotel thing?
Yeah, so no, that whole project was really interesting, because I think it came out of a bunch of us. I think we always just really, like you said, in talking to consumers and understanding them. Like one of the things that I did whenever I left Texas to move back to New York was they said, well, look, we'll put you in a corporate house or a corporate apartment. And I said, no, I actually want, so I lived in a hotel for a year because I wanted to like sit in the lobby. I wanted to see what do people experience when they travel. Like I just wanted to understand it very, very differently. And so the big change that we made that let keyless work was that we just started working completely differently. Because what we used to do is we would have an interesting idea, and we had 1,500 hotels that were in 11 brands. And we would say, great, this is an interesting idea. Let's roll it out to all of them. Well, the problem is that takes years, because there are different governments, there's different countries, there's different brands, there's different developers. Like it just took too long. And so we really tried to organize around this idea that, like, we would always say, like, agile is the new smart. I don't mean agile as in the agile methodology, but I mean our ability to work smaller, to work faster, to work different was going to make the difference. So instead of launching to 1,500 hotels, we started with 2. And we started with one that was here in New York and Harlem. And not surprisingly, we started with one in Cupertino across the street from Apple's campus. And so it was just those 2. And we put them in there and we learned. And we said, okay, like, you know, we have problems. Like if your phone is in your pocket and you're in your room and you walk past the door, it unlocks. That's a safety problem. If you're in the elevator and you need your key, how does that work? So like there was a lot of these sort of things we needed to figure out. So what we did was we started with 2 hotels, then we did 10, then 50, then 150, then, and we just sort of scaled and learned as we went. because I mean, it was almost just like acting like a startup where let's go in, let's spend a small amount of money, let's iterate, let's design, let's see how this works. And starting to work that way made all the difference, right? And then I think that was then what let us start to shift. How did we design apps completely differently? How did we think about everything totally differently? Because then for us, it became much more about how did we sort of anticipate what people were doing? How did we try to really get this idea and go iterate it and just do it as simply as we could? Because then we were able to have so much more success. And I think even in the work I do now, we did a research program that looked at 2,200 different companies globally. And I can tell you, like, if you work that way, on average, you will get work to market 6 times faster and 5 times cheaper, just because there's not all this back and forth. There's not. So I think like that was the change for us that made all the difference, was to just be able to say, okay, look, like let's just get more agile and let's not think we have to have all the answers.
Interesting. In- Interesting. I'll go back on that too. If you are just joining us, this is Talking Design with Stephen Gates. We are already a few minutes in. Currently, we have 114 persons watching us on our YouTube live stream. You're welcome if you're just joining us. So quickly, just before we continue, I'll talk about a bit about myself. I just figured I didn't say that, and also talk about our host Asha. So my name is Charles Njoku, and primarily I'm a multidisciplinary designer, but my career is currently focused in product design. Um, I live in Lagos, Nigeria, and I am a member of Asha Koteri. Asha is the Yoruba word for culture, and Koteri means a circle of people with a shared interest. Um, Asha Koteri is a Nigerian-based design community that is focused on growing designers who believe good design can change the world. We understand the cross-disciplinary nature of design, and we are big on collaboration, passion for growth, and competence. And these are like the fundamentals of each and every person in Harsha. We're currently capped at 150. It's an exclusive community, and the reason being that just even from understanding that we need to start small. I mean, we want to change the world, but let's see what 150 people can scale that to 1,500. 1,500 scales that to 1.5 million people, and I mean, we would change the world eventually. Yeah. So if you're just joining us, welcome. In today's edition of Talking Design with Stephen Gates, we'll be talking about the designer as a leader. Um, so I think there are like a series of conversations that came out from that before we came out to deciding that we wanted to talk to Stephen about this. Now, don't get me wrong here. We're not about to talk about how to become design leaders, but more like how to lead in design. And Stephen, I'm not sure you know this, but in Nigeria, a lot of businesses are largely engineering led or sales or marketing led. I mean, everybody wants to know what brings in the money, and feel like maybe engineering guys are the ones who like leads us to production, marketing, and sales um, leads us to bring the money in. So it's always engineering led and sales marketing, which isn't entirely a bad thing. But if you want to craft products and solutions that are human centered, and I mean, the overall impact is focused on people. I mean, over years, design has shown to be the one part that it's able to do that. So today, the one question for me personally, and for a lot of people would like to ask is, how do you lead design without titles? Earlier on, you told me you really do not care about titles and all of that. So I mean, that's one thing too, because we I think for me and for a lot of people, uh, I want to see us move beyond lead designer, senior designer, because I'm trying to understand how is that different from the guy who just learning design today and understands a few things. I mean, I get that with experience comes more responsibility, and I mean, senior designer feels, I mean, it feels nice to have the rank on, on your shoulder. But overall, we want to understand how do you lead uh, design into without really having without shining the light on the titles. And I mean, you've said a lot about your design career. So in more context to growing your design career without titles, we like to understand that too.
Yeah, I think so. No, I can tell you, probably unfortunately, that yeah, Nigeria is not alone. That the entire world are companies that are either product led, engineering led, or executive led. There are almost none that are design led. There are a few that maybe value design, but no, I think, I mean, that's been the most interesting part for me over the past 2 years is that right now I'm working with companies on 5 continents that I think as of today speak 16 different languages. But it's amazing how they all ask the exact same question that you just did. And I think that there is something about the creative condition. Like, I don't care what culture you're in, what continent you're in. Like, that's been the fascinating part to me was it was just like we all sort of share a similar struggle. And the way that I usually start to talk about it is that I think in many cases, if you want design to have a bigger impact, if you want to be more of a leader, if you want to be seen as a peer to engineering or to product, I think one of the biggest things that we need to do as designers is to understand the difference between design and creativity. Because I think in a lot of people, I think they're the same. They are very, very different, and understanding the difference makes all the world of difference. So I think that, for me, the real power that we have is in creativity. We are good at solving problems. We are good at looking at things in new ways. We are very good at sort of being comfortable being uncomfortable. And that every company and everybody wants and is creative. I will always say that. Like, for me, creative is not a department. And even for me, like, if you ever want proof of that, like go to like a bunch of little kindergartners or little kids. Like Fisher Price is one of the companies I've done work with. If you watch a class of kindergarten of young children, everybody's a superhero, everybody's a singer, everybody's a painter. Like, they are just, everyone is creative. What happens is that society, our education, our families, like we just sort of say, hey, look, that's not a real career. I think in many cases, designers are like the kids that survived because we just didn't listen too well. And we're like, oh, we still like to do this. But the reason why that's important to business is that if every business wants creativity, right? And I think a lot of times they'll use words that they don't know what they mean. They say, oh, we want to be more innovative. We want to be more collaborative. We want to be more like all these things. Okay, what you're actually saying, what you want to be is more creative. But I think that the reason why that's important is if you say, okay, look, what I am about for my career, what my team is about, what we do, first and foremost is about thinking, is about creativity. That is a very different position inside of a company than saying we're about design. Because I've always felt like design for me is the visual expression of great thinking. And the problem is that whenever you sit at a leadership table and you say, look, what we do is design, every other person at that leadership table thinks that what you do is just make things pretty, right? And whenever they think that way, they think that then you are a commodity. You are not to be taken seriously. All you're doing is executing on something. So I think that, for me, the start is to be able to say, okay, look, yes, we need to do good design. Yes, we need to be good at execution. But if we want to be taken seriously, if we want to have an impact, we need to be the ones that lead the thinking, that lead that creativity, that work with everybody else, right? Like, you don't do it by saying, hey, look, everybody else go away, right? Like, I've never been that, like, I know a lot of design leaders who think they should be like wearing a beret, doing a watercolor of their spirit animal dressed in all black with big glasses. I get 2 out of the 3. But like, telling everybody else how they don't understand what we do. And I think it's just part of what has happened, as we talked about, like the old days of design, like our parents with the printing press, is that was visual design. And that was really mostly about how did we just execute on something and make it look good. Well, especially as we get into digital, into so much of what design has become, it's much more about product design, which means it's gotten more complicated. The more people are involved, they want it to make more money. But I think, that's always been what I did at Starwood, what I've done at Citi, and what I do with all the companies that I coach, is to be able to say, look, if you really focus on we're here for the thinking, you are treated completely differently. Because whenever you just make it pretty, You're always left to the end. You're always the ones where everybody else does the real work, and then they tell you how to color in the line. So I think if you start with just that simple shift, and I think that's even for me, I've always based my career in being creative, in my ability to lead and to inspire, my ability to come up with something that is connected to people. Because I also feel like those are the things that are timeless. Because even as we talked about, the technology, even over just the course of our careers, has completely changed multiple times. So that's the thing. It's like, it's great. Like I said, it's great if you know Sketch. There are a lot of people I knew who were fantastic at Flash until that turned into a totally dead-end career. But I think if you have that ability to say, look, what I'm investing in, people are always going to need, that's how you get to a leader. That's how you create impact. That's how you really are able to change things. And I think, that for me that's been the struggle of my career. Like, I mean, my podcast is called The Crazy One because I literally have the words, here's are the crazy ones tattooed on my right arm, because I got to a point in my career where I realized one of my biggest mistakes was that I didn't listen to myself, that I didn't believe in myself, that I was spending so much time trying to be who I thought everybody wanted me to be. I wasn't being who I actually was, and I wasn't creating an impact. I wasn't being creative. So I think if you're able to make that shift and to be able to say, look, that's my real values and the way that I show up and think and help other people, that's 100% how you start that journey.
Interesting, pretty interesting. So, I mean, everything you said, it feels like we are, I mean, just playing the Nigerian scene because, I mean, a lot of our audience would agree with me. We have situations whereby um, designers want to be invested in the thinking. They want to be able to come up with rationale that actually not just fit into the ideas of stakeholders, but it's deeply rooted into solving problems for people. But I mean, a lot of times business goal and other stakeholder goals come above that, and that means turning. You just literally become the guy who just paints the boxes and fixing the
Right.
lines and push the screens and all of that. It's a complete struggle for a lot of people, and I mean, hopefully, conversations like this kind of we're able to bring executives to the talking table to see and other stakeholders to see that, like you said, design is the visual expression of great thinking. I think that I really find that profound, and it's once you are able to understand the thinking behind it, it's not about whether you like the lines or you like the boxes or it's the radius 10 pixels or is it 8 pixels. It's more about how everything comes together
Right.
to offer this really really impactful solution product or whatever I think you're giving out at any point in time. So I completely agree with you. And I also believe design is design is like the big picture of several moving parts.
Mm-hmm.
The overall manifestation, the result of design is at the foundation, several moving parts, different things happening together just to bring that big result, which everybody says, oh, this design is great. I mean, that's the result of several moving parts. And the moment we start seeing it like that, I think we will be able to appreciate the process. Because, like you said, one thing a lot of people do not get to do is like value the process and understand that it needs to happen
Right.
for us to get outstanding products, great solutions.
Well, and I think it's also, you really understand that your power is in your thinking. Because the thing that I've always found is that whenever I am at my best, whenever the people I work with in my team are at our best, whenever we're working on a new project, if I can go in and explain to you what the problem was, how we tried to attack it, what our thinking was, what the problems were we overcame, like if I can take you on that journey and explain all of that, as weird as it may sound, what it looks like almost doesn't matter at the end. Because they have so bought into, we know you have thought it out. We know that you know all the details. And that then again, the design is just how that came to life. And because what I see is in many cases, when you don't do that, they're looking for those answers, but they start to do it by picking apart the button color and the size of your text and like all that sort of stuff that doesn't matter. But I think it's a bit of almost like a Jedi mind trick thing where it's just sort of like, by the time you get to that point, they're just like, great, love it. Because I think they bought in. And I think, for me, there's two tricks that I use that I think make a massive amount of difference if you were trying to do this. And again, I did this when I went into Citibank. I did it when I've gone into Starwood. Just because you work at a big company does not mean it's easy or they get it, right? I think one is the more, and it's exactly what you said, because I think too often what happens is that there is this battle for who is right. Is design right? Is tech right? Is engineering right? Is our executive, like, who's right? Like, honestly, don't give a shit. Like, that's not what matters. Because if what we're doing is spending all of our time fighting about who's right, the work suffers. I'll always tell you, like, the work is the truth. I can look at your org chart, and if it matches your website navigation, I know how screwed up and siloed your company is before we ever talk. But I think if you're able to actually put that work in front of consumers and let them be the ones that tell you. So you have an idea and I have an idea. Great. Let's go test them both. Because then I'm not arguing about who's right. I'm not telling you that you're wrong. That was one of the things I've done with multiple teams is like once a week, we would just bring in the people we were designing for and show them what we were doing and see what they thought. At the beginning at Citi, that was super guerrilla. That was going to like the bank branch that was in the basement of our building with an iPhone and acting like a complete weirdo, like putting a prototype in somebody's face and filming it. So I think, there was a lot of that of just like, look, this isn't what I'm saying. This is what the people who like pay our salaries are saying. The other trick that I'll tell you is like, if you want to find a success story or find some change, go work on something nobody cares about. Like, this has always been my trick. Because most people, when they're like, we want the company to work differently, let's go work on the biggest, shiniest thing that everybody loves. Congratulations. That's where all the red tape and resistance is going to be, and it's never going to change. Like, again, at Citi, what I did was I went and found a team called Treasury and Transfer Services. These people are not fun at parties, but they were ones where it's like I could teach them design thinking. We could work in a totally different way. And then when it worked and I showed the CEO that these people who are like, they're basically responsible for the pipes that keep all the money moving, look how differently they work. And the reality is they loved the attention. They would do anything we wanted to do. So just that ability to focus on, that thing that nobody cared about gave me a success story to prove that it could happen here with a group that nobody cared about. And wow, what does that mean we could do for the whole company? So I think if you can also try to do things like that, I've seen time and time again, that sort of stuff gets you big results.
Very well said. I mean, I wouldn't take anything out of that. We're currently at 117 viewers. We're 38 minutes into Talking Design with Stephen Gates. Take a moment and put out a tweet, hashtag Ashakoteri, hashtag Talking Design with Stephen Gates, and we would love to see your interactions on social media. Also leave a question in the comment sections, and also you could actually tweet at Ashakoteri if you have any question, and we'll do well to pick it from there. Yeah. Um, so I mean, we've gone over how design can actually, I mean, when we look at design from the perspective of it being the big picture, on understanding that putting in allowing the process to shape design entirely is important. Um, so just looking at a few questions from our YouTube live streams, I'm not picking anyone in particular, but in summary, I could just say this. There isn't any traditional ladder or hierarchy from moving from a beginner to a lead designer. And I say this because I'm actually a typical example. So I've been doing design. I can say I've been doing design for well over 5 years, starting from working with my dad. If I mean, if you add starting from working with my dad, it's well over 15 years. But I mean, when I actually decided to take design as a career, it's well over 5 years now. And I've spent a huge part of that in print design, brand and comms, and all of that. I only transitioned into product design sometime around early 2018. And while I still maintained my marketing and comms strategist job, I was actually doing product design on the side. And for my first full-time job as a product designer doing UX, um, was a lead role. So I, if it doesn't feel like I moved from beginner to junior, then to a UX. I just went in for the interview and had a great conversation with the CEO and was like, "Yo, I mean, I think I like you. I think you are well grounded. So let's do this." So I mean, I probably got lucky on that one, and it might not be the same. It might not be the same for a lot of people, but I kind of understand that a lot of times there isn't any hierarchy to say you must have to do this to get to this or to get to that. So, what would you say is like a generalized outlook on how to intentionally scale the ranks of your design career? And also, I mean, more importantly, from a global perspective.
Yeah. So it's funny. So this is actually the exact topic that I'm going to talk about in the 100th episode of the podcast for this exact reason. Because I think, like, for me, one of the things that I realized is people are only genius or successful in hindsight. Because, like, if you look at my career and you said, okay, you're going to start out by working for your dad, you're going to go to college, then you're going to go work in video, then you're going to go work in advertising, then a hotel company, then a bank, then a SaaS startup, then everybody's going to go, oh, sure, that's the right way to be successful, right? No, nobody's going to say that. Like, there were times whenever I went to a hotel company or a bank, everybody told me I was dumb. Nobody told me I knew what I was doing. But then after I was successful, like, trust me, after my work showed up in the first Apple keynote, everybody wanted to know if I was hiring. I think it's just we're all chasing this like invisible script, and we all feel like we're doing it wrong. Because I think, especially when you're creative, being creative is so personal because it's based on my childhood. Did I have a good childhood? Were my parents together? Did they get divorced? Where we live someplace I was proud of or not? Do we have a lot of money or not? Like a lot of those sort of things. It's based on my education. Did you finish college? Did you not like, did you even go to college, right? It's based on your career. Do you work someplace people cared about? It's based on your insecurities. And the problem is none of those things ever looks like anybody else. And I think that we are globally taught that whenever you aren't like everybody else, that somehow that is bad or less than. It's why you're supposed to like go to high school, then go to college, then get married and have 2.5 kids and 1.5 dogs and get a house, like all these things. Nobody's life is ever like that, right? And I think we all get very caught up in what I'm supposed to be doing. And I think like that is a lot of the people that I coach, they are struggling because that's why I said before, I mentioned that, right? Like they are so concerned with trying to be who they think people want them to be that they aren't who they are. Whatever the path is that you are on, whatever your upbringing is, those things are 100% your strength because they make you unique. They give you a unique perspective. They let you be able to stand out from everybody else. And I think that's the thing is like, I'll always ask people, I'm like, whenever I coach them, I'm like, give me your favorite musician, give me your favorite artist, your favorite filmmaker, whoever that is. 100% of the time, those people got successful by not being like everybody else. Right. So I think that that's the thing. There's not a magic answer. There's not a script to be able to do this. And I think, but we all, just because we have that built-in insecurity, because when you do something creative, it is personal. And that's what a design imposter syndrome is like, I hope I'm doing it right. And most of us don't have the context to know. But I think that's that sort of thing is like, for me, it really like, the only thing that ever made me successful was my ability to try to connect my work to the people I was doing it for, my ability to just be able to work and really put in the time to get better, because I see so many people like they wait for the opportunity and then they start working to get better. Well, the reality is whenever you get there, the opportunity is already gone, right? Like that didn't happen. And I think my ability to have actually made peace with who I am, it took 2 tattoos and a bunch of other things for me to remind myself of who I am. That's why they're on both of my forearms. But like that, again, like when people ask me, like, well, how was I so successful with Apple? I worked my ass off. And unlike everybody else who showed up at that company or all these big companies, and they'll say, like, who do you want me to be? I'll do whatever you want. That is not who they want to work with. Because I showed up and said, look, this is what I'm good at. This is the way that I do. I work my ass off. I get results. This is what it is. And it was like, bang, great. Everything exploded. But I think that ability to realize that, like, you're enough. You are smart enough. Your process is good enough. And it's not going to look like anybody else. And that's a good thing. But I think if you're able to then balance, keep humble. So you always stay open to feedback, but stay clear about who you are. I think that's what's sort of paralyzing so many creatives, is because of things like social media, where we are constantly comparing our insides, our insecurities with the rest of the world's outsides. And they all look so perfect and like they have all the answers, and it's all bullshit, right? Like that's just not the way it is. And so I think, that's the thing for me, is that there is no secret. And many times actually when young people ask me that, I sort of get grumpy about it, because what they're looking for is a shortcut. But I think if you are truly yourself, put in that work and recognize that what makes you different is your strength, that's the key to moving your career along. That's the key to doing something different, because we've all been tricked that, like, if we just sort of do what our bosses tell us and follow, like, and do exactly and follow all those rules and are just like almost subservient to that we're going to get ahead. It's not the way that it works. Those people aren't the one who get promoted. The ones who stand up and have something to say and be able to bring something different to the party, those are the ones who get ahead. So I think, again, that's sort of been my crusade or mission or whatever it is to try to help people understand who are creative, that those things that you sort of beat yourself up about, if you look at them differently, those are the things that are going to, where all your success is going to be. I'll get down off my soapbox now.
Interesting. I mean, spot on. So, a colleague of mine, Jimmy, she's going to come on to, ask a few questions too. So, Jimmy, over to you.
Sweet. Thank you so much, Steven. You've given like so much gems. Like I've just been taking notes secretly. So a couple of questions have come in through the live stream, and so I want to like go through them and just kind of like get your take, because yeah, okay. Cool, thank you. So one question that came in that we think it's really important was that earlier on you mentioned, like, you said exactly this quote, like, if you want to find a success story or change, work on something that no one cares about. So what did you mean by something that no one cares about?
I mean, I think that work on the thing that nobody pays attention to. Work on the thing that people have overlooked. Work on, because in companies, there are the big things that make money, right? Like they're the things the executives cares about. They're the things that, so again, like whenever I worked at a bank, it would have been how you deposited a check or how you opened an account or how, like, those are the things that made the company money. Right. And so a lot of people cared about that, and there was a lot of attention on that. So what I knew is like, hey, if I want to be able to create some change, we're trying to recreate those things was not going to work. So for me, it was like, find the group, find the project, find that thing that matters, but people just aren't paying very much attention to it. Because then I think if you're able to go and work on that, then you're able to, because the biggest thing that you need is to be able to show people it's possible. Because it's great, like you can tell them how it works at Google or what they do, and like you can do that till the cows come home, nobody cares. Because they'll always say, like, that's great, it's not here. But if I can find people who want to work with me, who will find people who will partner with me, find people who will try to do something different, and then it works. Like that is one of the biggest things that you can use to change a company, is what I will describe as organizational jealousy, which means that whenever somebody finds success, then all of a sudden everybody else wants to do it that way. And it also is because, for me, and it's the hard part, is that initially when you try to do something different, they will make fun of you. They will like make jokes. They're going to do all those sort of things because you're trying to do something different. The funny part is, as soon as you find that project and you find some success, the same people who made fun of you will seek you out for the exact same reason they made fun of you, because you're willing to do something different and you're able to do something that they could not. So I think that's my thing, is like to find that place where you can be successful, find somebody who will partner with you, find some way that you can show this works. Because once you have that, that gets much harder to argue with than like the, oh, we think we want to do sort of a thing.
Right. Thank you so much. Another question that came in was around honing your craft and kind of developing your skills. So the question was, what's your advice on the balance developing your craft versus your craft being design and your managerial, business, and leadership skills? Is there a
Yeah.
best way to approach that when you move to more design leadership roles?
Yeah. No, it's a really, really good question. I think on the design side, my approach has always been like, you need to learn the tools. You need to learn, but for me, I've always looked at sketch, like, no, even social media. Like for me, everything is just a pencil. It's a way to communicate. If I can't make a mark that matters, if I can't create something that connects with people, none of it matters, right? I think we get very caught up in that. I think that, for me, it really is about with your craft. Like I said before, for me, my craft is my creativity. My craft is, how do I have ideas? My craft is developing my self-awareness of how do I have ideas, because it's different from everybody else. And I think that's been one of the things whenever I talk about putting in that work is that, I've gotten to the place where I've done it long enough. I can work extremely quickly because I understand what my creative process is and how I need to work. So that is my craft, is to constantly stay in touch with that and work on that, because the problem is you change. Who I was 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 1 year ago, 6 months ago is different. So my creative process is different. So I have to keep working on it. Now, leadership in that moment is probably the single hardest in your career, because just because you're a great designer by no means that you are a good leader, because they are two totally different skill sets, right? Like one is about ideation and execution and connection with people through your design. Leadership is about psychology and sociology and about trusting other people to do the work. And instead of having the answer, giving them an opportunity. And so I think that transition point gets really hard, mostly because most companies have no training or recognize that it's two different skill sets. That's why they'll just keep throwing people who are good designers at leadership roles, hoping that like eventually they're just going to find one that sticks. But most of the time they stick because of skills that they did not develop at that company. So I think that a lot of it for me is the ability to start to understand other people. How do you trust other people? How do you start to think about them? And that, because I think that's also the moment for me when I realized like my best work was no longer going to appear in my portfolio, that it was really going to be about the people I invested in. How did I build them up? How did I do a lot of those sort of things? And as weird as it may sound, the place where I tell most people to start is to go take an improv comedy class. And that may be the weirdest advice you have ever heard. But the reason why I say that is because I think one of the best things you can do as a leader is active listening and active response. Meaning that whenever I listen to you, I'm not listening for the silence so I can tell you how you're wrong or what I think. I'm listening so I can understand what you're saying, and then I can help you and build on it, and then actively respond to it. And those are the skills that improv teaches you, is you have to be present in the moment. You have to listen, because most of the leadership coaching I do for a lot of CEOs and executives, to be totally blunt, is to teach them to shut up, because they think that like being in charge is giving people the answer. No, that's the way you make your organization weaker. And so I think if you're able to start to do that, to understand what is your process, and then again, how can I help enable other people and to set them up to be successful, that's that transition. And there's probably about 20 episodes of the podcast that talk about all that stuff, because that's what I said, is it is not a transition that we ever talk about, train about, teach. And that, so that's why I think so many people struggle, because it's a fundamentally different skill set. But yeah, that's such a good question.
Interesting. Thank you so much. Another question that we have, I think this is pivoting from leadership to beginners, because we do have like a couple of people that are just starting out in design. So someone wants to know like what advice you would have for a designer, especially a beginner that struggles with imposter syndrome, and how and the other part of the question is, and how do you know that design is the one for you? I want to get your take on that, because that's like
Sure. So I'll do that in reverse order. I mean, so what I would say is it may not, so, and I get this sometimes, right? So for me, it may not actually be design. It may be being creative, and that can take a lot of different forms. I mean, for me, at the end of the day, it's like, what lights you up? What makes you happy? What do you get passionate about? What do you start talking about differently? What's that thing that you go to sleep thinking about and wake up in the morning getting excited about? Like, that's that sort of thing. And again, creative comes in a lot of different forms. It couldn't maybe necessarily just be design. So I would definitely say to sort of, like I said, think about that, or just watch yourself, right? Because I think that sort of self-awareness of, hey, I did this and it worked. How do I do that more? Hey, I did that and that didn't work. Maybe don't do that as much. That's going to be the sort of thing that, again, I think that self-awareness really helps. As to the imposter syndrome, welcome to the club. And I think everybody has it. If they tell you they don't, they are lying. And I can tell you what, I'll tell you. So this is a 100% true story. So like 3 months ago, I wanted to start a series like this, where I do these conversations in these office hours. I'm going to get people together all over the world. They're going to talk about it. The first one, the big topic, is imposter syndrome. I, the expert who is having a session on imposter syndrome, I was like, oh, I'm going to do 3 of these. I didn't think anybody was going to show up, so I listed them one at a time. Only later to realize that the guy who is hosting and supposedly the expert on imposter syndrome had so much imposter syndrome that he wouldn't list all 3 talks at once. So, right. So I think that, like, one, everybody has it. And it's just, how do you manage it? How do you fight it? I think, is a bit of a shameless plug. So thanks to the pandemic, like 3 weeks ago, I started a YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube, put in the crazy one, you'll find it. I did an entire video that's like half an hour long that just talks about all the things that I've learned about managing and fighting imposter syndrome, because I think it is such a big problem. But the reality is, sorry, you're always going to have it. It's just, yeah, how do you work with it and relate with it? That'll make the difference.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think something that you've kind of just pinpointed, you've been saying a lot of, is about like knowing yourself and just like really understanding yourself. Because I guess as humans, we evolve, right? And your creative process also evolves. So being conscious of that, that's something that I didn't know before. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Well, no, I think because what we do is we either will fall victim to, we don't know ourselves, or it's very easy to blame them. Right? The them is, my boss doesn't understand me. The company didn't recognize me. I didn't get the opportunity. Like, there's always some reason for them. Like, the best advice I can ever give anybody is success is a choice. Like, if you let them win, then you're right. You're not going to be successful. If you let them win and you don't put in the work, if you let them win and you don't put in the work understanding your process, you're right. And I think that's the hard part of this, is it is getting to know yourself and putting in the work that makes the difference.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So another question around starting as a new designer is working with startups. That's like a big thing, right? Startups just like get a designer and like, yeah, you design stuff, and it's like, okay. So someone wants to know, like, if you have some tips or some like advice for new designers working with startups.
Yeah, I would just say so again, welcome to the club. Because that's definitely, I'm in the midst of, again, Invision is 700 people. It's definitely still a startup. I would just say the biggest advice I would probably give you is just to make sure that you define what you need to be successful. Because the biggest mistake that I see a lot of designers make, and this is in startups and in other places, is that, instead of saying, look, I need these 5 things to be successful, we need to work this way. What we do is we say, oh, I'll take the 1 or 2 things that you gave me that wasn't enough information and not nearly enough time, and I'll make it work. And then at the end of it, it's somehow a mystery why the work isn't better. So I think, that ability to just say, look, this is the way I want to work. This is what it is I need, to be able to push back or ask for those sort of things. Because the other problem is, whenever they give you bad things and you turn it into a success, it's sort of like having a puppy, right? Like if the puppy pees on the carpet all the time and every time you give it a treat whenever it pees on the carpet, it will never change. The people you work with are exactly the same. If they keep doing bad things and you keep making it work, then that's going to be a problem, right? So I think your ability to sort of define and say, look, this is what I need. And then again, whenever they behave badly, to sort of help correct them or to be able to fix that, that usually is the best way to try to get successful.
Right. Interesting. So I have a question from someone that actually works at Citibank in Mexico. And she was like, yeah, I feel you so much, Steph. So she feels you, she understands. And she wants to know, so she's trying hard to adopt a design system, but the directors don't seem to care. So she needs like some advice on how she can not lose her hope. And I think to generalize that question for people that are just starting out, especially if you're working in like an enterprise and you're doing like in-house design, like design systems are things that are like really important in that kind of space. So how can you advocate for a design system without without like getting on people's toes?
Well, yeah. So I think, so two questions. I would say one, so yeah, I definitely remember because I worked with the team in Mexico City at Banamex. So I would say like, send me an email because I don't want to have that conversation in a recorded format, but I can tell you, yeah, what do you be able to do? What did we build? What might still be there? Who do you talk to? So reach out to me. I'll help you with that. Design systems are a really interesting thing. And it's funny. Yesterday I did a big interview on a podcast about this. I mean, for me, design systems are really difficult because one, they require design and engineering to work together, maybe for the first time ever, because you need both sides of the house for that sort of stuff to work. But I think that in many cases, you need to be clear with everybody why you have it and what does it do. Because for me, the most basic design system just gets everything to look alike. But the real value of a design system is that, again, it lets you work more quickly. You can work through things like here in America, there's the Americans with Disabilities Act. So if you're blind or visually impaired, it helps work with that. Like there's a lot of things, and what it really does is it lets us focus on what should matter, which is the experience. And I talk to plenty of designers who get very, very mad at design systems because apparently like drawing a button every time is somehow like the way that you're a real designer. But I think that in many cases, it lets us focus on the experience. And so, I think it's a bigger conversation. Like I said, keep an eye on social media because I literally just did an hour talk about this. But I think it really is about getting people to see the value in it. Telling people that it's going to be pretty or consistent isn't going to do it. Telling people we can work faster, we're going to be more consistent. We should be able to, again, do updates and our pipeline can be better. It will actually save us money. They're often very hard to fund because they don't directly line back to a line of revenue or like a journey. So yeah, it's definitely a big challenge. And I'll post a couple of resources in Twitter about that too, about how to do that. Because I think there's some good stuff out there, but I think design systems are completely the future. Because again, as we talked about moving to product design, but they are insanely complicated to get right.
Interesting. And I'm also working with my team to build a design system, and it's been really, really, really interesting. And now they're talking about how to research for a good design system, and I'm like, I have no idea how to do that. So it's definitely really complex. It's something that I think a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah.
So another question is around growing your career as a designer without managing people. So this is for people that are senior designers but don't want to go through the managerial route. So like, what's your advice for them?
I mean, the real advice, and I think this is the hard advice, is that you need to find companies that actually acknowledge that an individual contributor path is possible. Because I think the problem is for the vast majority of companies, advancement only comes with leadership. But again, I think as you look at more enlightened companies, Uber, Airbnb, Google, Apple, Facebook, like ones like that, there are very significant individual contributor paths that you can go on to go through the company. But it's like I said, I think it's just, it's definitely possible. But in many cases, also, whenever I coach people who will tell me that they don't want to go into leadership, for me, there's also just a discussion as to why. Because I would argue that probably you have just as much to contribute. Maybe you feel like you're a little bit more introverted. Maybe you feel like you aren't the typical, sort of way of leading and things like that. But again, I tend to think that as you go on in your career, it can be an incredibly satisfying, humbling, challenging sort of way of doing things as well. But yeah, the biggest problem right now is that that role is not viewed as a legitimate career path, and I think that needs to change.
Thank you so much for answering our questions. I'm going to just hand it over to Charles to ask some more questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot that's been put into perspective with the conversations and the questions already. For example, I mean, not everybody wants to lead because I mean, the unspoken rule is to grow your career, become a manager, and kind of like. But I mean, some people really don't want that. They actually just want to enjoy their job and go back to the families and chill out, and don't want to ever be bothered by the pressure of trying to lead in design. But fair enough. Yeah. So, Steven, the next question would be around, not question, conversation really, would be around design transformation. So, I'm not sure there's any better person to talk about this than you. And I mean, you're the head of design transformation for Invision, and before becoming the head design evangelist. So off the top of my head, I only know a bit about digital transformation. I remember taking a course from Darden Business School, University of Virginia, sometime I think somewhere last year on Coursera. But apparently, and over time, I've been told that design transformation seems to have an entirely different outlook when compared to digital transformation. So could you like kind of like take it from the fundamentals to what it entails and also your experience and what's overall the value of design transformation? Because it looks like we'll be transforming several companies after this.
Yeah, I think, it's one of those phrases that it was funny. I think like 2.5 years ago, whenever I started that, everybody went, "What the hell does that mean?" And now everybody seems to be doing it. I don't know that it has a single definition, right? So I think I can tell you the way that I define it. Design transformation to me is just having companies value creativity. It's having them be, because I think that the biggest thing that I saw was that for so many companies, whenever they started to work on something, they had a solution that they wanted to be vetted, not a problem that they wanted to be solved, right? Like some executive, some product person, like somebody said, "This is what I think is the right idea. Go find me the data, go find a bunch of stuff that proves that this is a good idea," right? No good work ever comes out of that. So a lot of it for me is just to be able to get companies to embrace creativity, to understand that design is a part of the process, to be able to talk to their customers more, to do that customer testing, which again, that's the central tenet of things like design thinking or Google's design sprints or like those sort of things. And so for me, that's the sort of stuff that really matters, is to try to get them to do that. Now, how that comes off changes greatly, because I think, one of the worst parts of design thinking, of design sprints, and design transformation is that they all have the word design in the name. And that whenever people hear design, usually they sort of like clam up and don't like want to be able to do it. And it's funny, like even for me at Citibank, like the reason why we were able to scale our design thinking work was that we never called it design thinking. We called it a discovery mindset, because when you did that, everybody thought it was new and interesting. You called it design thinking, everybody got all weird about it. So I think that that's just all that it really is it's a return to creativity. It's a return to problem solving. It's a return to trusting each other. It's all the things that design and creativity should do that somehow we seem to have lost along the way, in the way that we work in too many companies.
I mean, fair enough. I mean, Dewey, Dewey is one person who gets this jitters when they mention design thinking flying around, and I think buzzwords are like a killer. Actually, with the design and you don't want to start with me on with the titles. Lead UX engineer, UX developer, and you, you just want to okay, which is which, like why this title. And I think it goes on even with the systemic processes. You see different design processes being given very outrageous names, and you're like, not again. Not again. But I mean, understandably, I clearly get your thoughts on design transformation. So I mean, interesting insight. But what's specific about your role at Invision when you were the head of design transformation? What are like a few specifics about that role? If you like share with us.
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing about my role, the role was really the thing that I think we saw was sort of what I said before, right? Like for most companies, their problem was not having ideas. Their problem was dealing with everything that was around those ideas, the politics, the legacy thinking, the fear of change, the like, and a lot of teams just didn't know how to navigate those or how to change it. And I think the thing that we were able to do is that one, we work with 100% of the world's Fortune 100 brands. So if you want to talk about how you want to be like Google or Pinterest or Facebook, it's like great, I can actually tell you how they work. But the other thing that I realized, and so a friend of mine named Greg Larkin wrote this book called This Might Get Me Fired. It's a fantastic book that talks about like being an entrepreneur, meaning like how do I actually get things done inside of a company. I think it's on sale for like 99 cents right now through his site. Like it's a really good read. But one of the things that he said in the book that I always thought was true is that for most companies to get the actual innovation, to get the creativity that they all say that they want, for that to actually happen, it needs to happen in a way that almost like short circuits and goes around their regular process, because their regular way of working just kills it too much, almost 100% of the time. And I think that that was sort of the other thing that I realized was whenever I was able to combine my experience with our perspective, with the ability that as an outsider, I can come in and say things to companies, CEOs, leaders, that would be politically suicidal for somebody who works there to say. Like, again, there's a company I worked with not long ago, and they asked me, like, well, tell us, like, what do you think our superpower is? I said, you don't want me to answer that question. They're like, no, be honest. I'm like, you definitely don't want me to answer it then. They're like, no, what do you think? I said, your superpower is you're amazing at rationalizing being mediocre. Like you guys copy everybody else and you look at what everybody else is doing and you do the same thing. And then you throw yourself a parade about how great it was and how original you are. And it's like, and then you want to sit around and complain about why you're not gaining market share and why you're not getting any differentiation. And somebody, if you work there, who said that would have been probably fired on the spot. Right. But I think that's almost what that's what it's become, is that, a lot of my work really is almost as a like therapist and interventionist, to come in and say, and it's why sort of like I have a deck that I'd had to talk about, and it talks about like a few of these common problems. I have presented it all over the world, and every single time I do it, everybody thinks I'm psychic, because that's the thing is like, right, we all sort of suffer from these similar things. And so that's why it's also for me, like, I think that's why the definition of design transformation is difficult, because the problems are so different. And that's why I've never believed that sort of like agencies or consultancies that have this playbook. All that I see is like companies who are spending years trying to unwind the damage that was done from everybody thinking there's a playbook. And I think that's always the way that I've worked, is for me, like we just start with a conversation. What's wrong? What's going on? What's not? And then we can start to tailor on, do we start with the design team because they need to understand what their value is, like what we talked about before? Do we start with the executives, the whole company? Like, but that's what transformation is it's just that ability to stand up and just say, and just speak truth to power. And again, I think it's just not doing it to complain, but to have solutions. And that's why I said, like, who better equipped than us to do it? We're used to jumping off the cliff and building our wings on the way down. We're the ones who are used to being comfortable being uncomfortable. But that's the thing, right? Is I think when we're able to do that, then those are the things that really make the difference. But again, I think then we need to see ourselves as how do we evolve and to be those agents of change.
Interesting. So I think um, saying the truth to stakeholders or even businesses about when it comes to these conversations, trust me, it will get you fired in the so
Yeah, and the best thing I can tell you to do is that when you try to do that, lead with a question, not a statement, right? Because I think a lot of people get in trouble when they say, hey, look, this isn't right. You're doing this wrong. You don't understand, right? Those are statements. And that either I agree with you or I fight you with not much in the middle. I think if you're able to say, this isn't working, we don't understand what's going on. Like there's a lot of, if you're able to be able to kind of say, hey, look, how do we do this together? That is a very, very different thing than most of the time, because everybody else tends to be like, that's the problem, right? Because for most companies, what I see is when there's a problem, instead of investing in coming together, instead of investing in a conversation, what people invest in is a whole lot of emails to figure out who's to blame. And then it's like, it's no mystery why then we're not doing better work, because we don't trust each other.
I mean, outstanding. Lead with a question and not a statement. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And it just goes to show how, I mean, the next question I was going to ask was actually around effective communication. And you pointing that out kind of like leads into all of it. Because everyone, stakeholders and non-stakeholders alike, seem to always have an opinion about what design should be. Yeah, and it always causes a conflict. Um, and I really don't know, but for others, one of the most difficult learnings for me, it's kind of like growing to understand that you have to be able to manage expectations. You have to be able to align everyone. I mean, you wouldn't succeed at aligning everyone, but let it be evident that you're putting everybody on the table and having this open conversation. So it
Right.
takes effective communication, collaboration, goal setting, etc., to be able to bring everyone up to speed. Just so, I mean, we're clear that anything we decide, it's not me deciding, we are all deciding because we have a clearer picture of what's going on here. So,
Right.
on several occasions, I mean, I don't like you would agree with me. This is probably also a global issue, but in Nigeria, always feels like engineering determines how these conversations go. Yes, and oftentimes it takes a lot of back and forth. Like, okay, the project is not moving. Everybody's complaining. So how do we fix this? Well, I mean, we've been trying to fix it, but it seems like one person is insisting to go that way. So just quickly, could you like take your design transformation experience and kind of like take us through how we can be able to bring everyone to the table to understand that, like you
Yeah.
said, it
Yeah.
has to be from an overall outlook rather than one person pushing for this
Right.
change to happen.
Yeah, and it's sort of, it's sort of what I said before about where there's that war of who's right. Because a lot of times there's that back and forth. Because like design's like do it this way, no, engineering is like, well, no, I want to do it this way, and it's like nobody listens to each other. One of the things that I'll do is that most of the time I'll just create like a line, and what I'll do is I'll say like, okay, the project starts here and the project is over here, and I'll give them like 4 different colored markers, and I'll say like, okay, red is design, blue is engineering, green is product. What I want you to do is on this line, draw some dots. And the dots are going to be like, when is each of these teams involved? So like, again, there can be multiple dots, there can be one big dot. And what I want you to do is by the size of the dot is how much involvement do they have, right? So just real simple, they all get together, they make a whole bunch of dots. And so I do that exercise with each of those individual teams. Then what I do, and 100% of the time it's true, is I sit down with all those teams and I show them and I pin all these little lines up on the wall. And it is amazing how none of them ever match. They all think that they're involved in different places. They all think that they're involved in different things. And because we all are making these assumptions about who's in control or what are we doing. So the biggest thing for me is just to sit them down and to be able to say, look, we all own the success of this, right? Like if engineering lets it down or design has a problem, like when it goes to the customer, they don't care. They don't understand any of that. So we all own this success. We all own this idea. We all own different pieces. But for design, what I'll try to do is then invite them all into that process. So again, Engineering may not want to come in to be a part of a brainstorm. But if you can get them to come in so they can say, well, hey, if you did it this way, we can do it a lot faster. Hey, what if we did this? Bring product in so that it's not just like, here's a bunch of requirements you blindly have to follow. Great, let's test them and see if that's what people really want. And I think that's why I said, the more you can make this into a conversation, the more you can say, hey, look, let's just test all this and let's just do it together. And you know what? We'll be the ones who help you. We'll be the ones who do this. Because that way it's not, oh, hey, I've already got this design that's already done that I didn't show to engineering and product told me to do. Because then it's just sort of like everybody's just pointing fingers at each other. But I think if you can, because to me, that's the biggest thing. If you look at teams that really work, is trust. It's true of sports teams. It's true of the military. It's true of like superheroes, right? Like the Avengers always come together and we get some billion-dollar movie when they all start to trust each other, right? I think it's just, how do you actually take the time to sit down and value somebody else's perspective? And so I think, you know, for me, that ability to do that really makes a big difference, because, you know, if not, and it's just always that fight for who's in control and why didn't you do what I say, you don't value anybody else's work. And so again, I think those are going to be those sort of challenges. But, you know, the biggest advice that I give people, and again, this may be another one of those ones that sound funny, don't underestimate the power of lunch. Like whoever that person is that's driving you crazy, whoever that person is that doesn't listen to you, go buy them lunch, right? Or like virtually, like go use, I don't know, Instacart or Uber Eats, or like, again, whatever it is, like just like have food delivered to their house and to your house, and just say, look, I don't want to talk about the project. I don't want to talk about whatever happened in the past. I just want to talk about like, how can we work together, right? Like, what do I need to do differently? How can I help you with it? Like, what, this isn't working in the way that it should. Can we work on making this better? It's amazing the results you get doing that, as opposed to, here's the list of all the things that your team did wrong, and here's what the defects were, and here's what this is, and you didn't listen to me. And it's like, what is the incentive to change? So I think just even those sort of simple shifts make a huge difference.
That's very insightful. I guess this is the concluding part of Talking Design with Steven, and pretty sure we're going to be doing this some other time. I would.
And I'm happy to come back and and to actually like give that presentation that I give to a lot of companies that talks about this stuff. Like, it's about 45 minutes long. Like, again, I'm happy to come back. We can do this again and sort of walk through that, because I think it goes through a lot of that stuff in sort of a bit more detail. So yeah, any of that stuff that would help, let me know.
Yeah, definitely. So just a quick wrap up. My colleague Mudia will be giving a final closure, and we'll call it a day.
All right. Hey, Steven. Great one so far. Thanks a lot. I'll be heading over to subscribe to your YouTube channel pretty soon. Oh, which also reminds me, everyone who is on the live stream, you could do it to just hit the subscribe button for Asha. And if you have questions, you could send a tweet at Asha with the hashtag, and then we'll get back to you. So I have a question for you, Steven, just to wrap up. Not design related. We have had that serious conversation already. First off, I love Kermit on the background. What's the story behind the action figures, and which is your favorite right there?
Oh yeah, so this is so much worse than you have any understanding of. So yeah, so this is actually what the rest of my studio looks like.
Oh, this is super cool.
Okay. Oh yeah, so no, I've got, yeah, this is what happens whenever you don't have children and you're like a man child. You know, so yeah, these are like all my art toys and stuff like that. If I had to pick one favorite one, it would probably either be that Mr. Incredible maquette that's right there that came from Pixar for my animation background, or, and that's this way, I have this chrome Darth Vader helmet that sits next to my desk that's also sort of one of my favorites. So those would, either one of those would probably be it, but I don't know. Yeah, I got like a signed picture of Steve Wozniak gave me over there. I do a bunch of work for Metallica. Like, I don't know. That's why I say it's like, these are all, my whole house is full of this sort of, the rest of the house is much more grown up than this, but like, yeah, these are all just like, because some of the little things are just goofy things, but they have a lot of memories. So yeah, this is, that's why I just sort of show people this little sliver, because when they see the rest, it's kind of like, yeah, they think I'm like some large child, which I probably am.
I mean, no shame in that, right? For our next live stream, would love it if you could show us like the whole spectrum, so like we could see you completely.
Well, no, actually, that's one of the best things that we do on when we do remote meetings for the team is we'll do like our own episode of Cribs. So you'll actually like do it, like get on Zoom on your iPhone and like walk around your house. Like if you live in a New York City apartment, it's a real short tour, but like where you could actually, it's a great team building thing is to actually have people go around and do like an episode of Cribs where they show you the space they work in.
Okay, that sounds pretty cool. All right, so I'm guessing like this is your favorite room to work in, like creativity and all that, right?
Oh yeah, no, I think for me it's always been super important that, especially because so I work 100% remote, but like I always wanted to have a space that whenever I went into it, it was about being creative. And so for me, like, again, it's stuff that I love around animation. It's, again, the ability to, I do art, I do a lot of other things, but like whenever I'm here, it's about being creative and just having that space where your mind sort of like as soon as you go in there gets to work. So yeah, I think I've always done that. I'm in the process of like actually trying to move back to my hometown. I want to design the same thing, but yeah, that's why it was always important for me to be surrounded with that stuff that just inspires you.
Awesome. All right. So I'm going to ask one more question, but just going to let everyone know that we have a feedback form, which we would love you to fill. Just like know how you enjoyed this, what we could do better, stuff like that. So this is a pretty odd question, right? If you just need like 2 minutes for this. If you were to tell a story that had to do with your career, maybe not about growth, maybe some funny story you tell at parties or something, what is that one go-to story you tell that maybe makes people laugh or has maybe it's kind of moral lesson to it, something that you feel is quite interesting about your life?
I mean, I think the one that I get asked about the most is the tattoo, the Here's Are the Crazy Ones tattoo. Because like I think a lot of people are always like, oh, so you're a big fan of Apple, and it's like, well, yeah, I mean, I did work with them, but I think that it was just, for me, there was that story of just I spent so long in my career, like I said before, like just trying to be what I thought everybody else wanted me to be, feeling so like an outsider, feeling like I didn't fit in, feeling like how I did things was wrong, and there was that moment, and it's hard to say because not everybody gets that moment, but where I did get to go and start to have success, or I started to work with Apple or do some of those sort of things where I was able to start to really realize that all those things that I always felt was wrong, those things that made me feel like I was different, that was what I said before, those things that I thought were my weakness were really my strength. And so that was actually why I got the tattoo, was because I wanted it every single day. I wanted it as a reminder. I wanted it in a place that was really visible. Like, trust me, whenever you walk into that with a meeting, it definitely sets the tone for a lot of people. Like when it's kind of like, oh shit. Like I said, some days it's a reminder. Some days whenever I do something, it's an affirmation that I'm doing the right thing. But I think that for me, it was just really that ability to kind of be authentic, and how important that was that thing that really just sort of changed everything. And like I said, and for me, it was trying to do it in that sort of way. Again, I don't think everybody needs to get a tattoo, but and that's why I said it was, for me, it was really all about that, because I think I started to realize how many other people went through that. And I think, that is the hard part with this, is that how many people are affected by it, how many people struggle with this. I mean, even to the point where, my podcast started because I went to a conference and did a talk, and there's a young man who came up to me afterwards and said he felt so alienated by what was going on, and he didn't know how to fit in, and his imposter syndrome was so bad that either he was going to find somebody that helped him feel you fit in, or he was going to kill himself. And the reality is I talk to somebody like that about once a month. And so I think that those are the things to me, is that also like everybody has a voice that matters. Everybody, like, again, I would love, like, again, if you got a message, reach out to me. Like, I would love to have more speakers who do not look like me in the design community. Like, that is my biggest thing that I'm doing right now. Like, I am so sick of like old white guys all talking to each other. Like, it is really about like, how do we bring in more voices? How do we bring more to this? There is this unprecedented moment in history where we all have an excuse to evolve. And so for me, like leaning into that, but I think that to me is, again, I think that's that story and that tattoo that sort of changed everything, because it forced me to really own it. And so, yeah, I think that's that one thing that for me always really made the difference.
All right. Thanks a lot for this, Steve. Remember, guys, send your questions, fill the feedback form, and, just like have fun with it. Back to Charles. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Steve. Back to Charles. You can wrap up now.
Okay. Thank you so much, Steve, for finding out time to talk to us. I enjoyed every bit of it, and I hope you enjoyed it too. And to our audience, this is Talking Design with Stephen Gates. Some other time, we'll be bringing you another guest on the show, and we'll be talking about other elaborative stuff. And definitely, we'll be bringing Steve back. So watch out for that. Meanwhile, do well to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can check out stephengates.com, and you can also subscribe to his podcast. He has 99 episodes. Pretty sure you're not going to be able to go half of all of that because you would have to kind of like replay some just to keep it in again. It's been really helpful for me, and I'm very sure you find it interesting. I'm just hoping that's enough sales speech to get on Steven's 100 podcast.
Well, no, thanks so much for having me, and I'll be happy to come back anytime.
Thank you so much, Steve. And
Thank you so much.
on this note, we call it a day. Do have a nice day, and thank you.
Thanks.